Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for your lunch hour. My name is Lisa Butler, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. We're going to be talking about the Turlock Sub Basin Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And the Sub Basin has been in the process of putting together a groundwater sustainability plan. They'll be able to share some chapters with you. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So what we're going to be doing today in the session is just kind of walking through the different information. There's lots of opportunities for you to ask questions and also opportunities for you to provide comments on what you've heard. If you'd like to talk to us verbally, just raise your hand. I'll be able to help you out and just pick you up that way. I'll call on you. I'll have you unmute. If you're having trouble with your microphone, you can use your phone. Just go into your control panel. It will show you how to switch over to your phone if you don't happen to have a microphone on your computer, and you can just kind of go either way, whichever one works the best for you. We will be recording this, and a copy of the webinar and all the materials presented will be made available at the website, and we'll send you more in a follow-up email about that. So with the next slide, please. So once again, you can either type in your questions. There's a little question box that you can type in, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Both of those are good, and we're happy to go both ways. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to have you go back one. If you're just on your phone and you didn't have a chance to actually log in, you can also send us comments at an email, and I'll just say the email very slowly. The email is Turlock Groundwater, and that's just how it sounds, at gmail.com. And if it's easier for you to type on at an email address, then please use that. Same thing, those questions will get to us and we'll be able to put them forward. And if you have comments afterwards, you don't need to even ask them today or questions. You can just send them to that same address, turlockgroundwater@gmail.com. So with that, now I'll go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Herb Smart. And Herb, I'll have you just kind of talk a little bit about the other team members that are here with us today, and then tell us more about what's going on with the Turlock Sub Basin and the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and why you're even doing this water sustainability plan, what in the heck that's about. So Herb, take it away.
Sure, thank you, Lisa. So some of the people we have here on the call, again, I'm Herb Smart. I'm a member of the Turlock Sub Basin Technical Advisory Committee. I work for Turlock Irrigation District. And other people we have on the call, well, they'll come through in a second, but we also have Michael Cook from the Turlock Sub Basin. He's the chair of the West Turlock Sub Basin Technical Advisory Committee. Debbie Montalbano, Karen Morgan, Lacey McBride, and Jennifer Land, all who have been instrumental in working toward groundwater sustainability and many of the tasks that are associated with that. And then of course we have our assistants from Stantec helping out. You already know Lisa, and also on the line is Marisa Perez Reyes. So happy to get started with my first slide here. And what it is not something that's too surprising to anybody. You know, Sigma, the way we describe it in the Turlock Sub Basin is it's a three-step process when you oversimplify it, or simplify it, as I like to call it, at its best. And the first step we've already achieved. That's why you see a checkbox there. Is we formed our 2 GSAs, and we formed those before the deadline in 2017. Now the second step that we're on, which is probably you know, it seems like it's the longest step, but ultimately implementation of our groundwater sustainability plan in step 3 is going to be the longest step through 2042. So step 2 is where we're at. We're developing a groundwater sustainability plan. Both sub-basin GSAs are developing the plan jointly to have a single groundwater sustainability plan for management of the sub-basin. And that has to be done before January 31st of next year. So we're getting close to the deadline. We're obviously making progress. You're going to hear a lot more about what's been done in the next few slides by other speakers. And then of course the last step, step 3, is you have to implement your plan and get results and achieve undesirable results. And so that's the 3-step process in a nutshell related to the Turlock Sub Basin. let's
So
go to the next slide.
before you move off of that, let me just check with the audience really quickly. And audience, could you just raise your hand for me? So go over to your control panel. Could you just raise your hand for me if you're familiar with what those are, groundwater sustainability agencies, there's deadlines and all that. If you know about that, could you just raise your hand for me so I can tell? And I see a couple hands up. I'm just want to make sure if anybody else needs more information that we do that. Yes, everybody has their hand up, so perfect. And Savannah, I don't see your hand, but I'm just gonna trust if you need something, you're gonna send me a note to let me know. Okay, go ahead, Herb.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. That's actually a really good check on knowledge. So let's go to the next slide. Now, what we're starting to do is we started talking about, okay, where have we been? Where are we going? What have we done? What's been done? So the big look right now is that right now we're developing draft chapters of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or as I'll say throughout the rest of this webinar, the GSP. And we're developing those chapters. There's a total of 4 chapters that are out right now. You're going to hear more about that as we move on. And we're taking comments on those chapters, and we're improving those chapters with the goal of having a GSP adopted by both GSAs before the January 31st deadline. And you'll hear more a little bit about timelines on that. We're also working on an annual report. A few months after we turn in the GSP, every year we have an annual report that's going to be due to the Department of Water Resources. That's already in the works, and so that's been being developed. We're also working on, there's physical needs that have to be taken care of in all of this. There's GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency's staffing that has to happen, because eventually they're going to have to be the local regulators of this law. And then we also are working on things like monitoring wells and ways to monitor the things that we say that we would like to do, and the actions we would like to achieve in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And there's, of course, tons of meetings. This is one meeting. We've had, I don't know, probably it would have to be the multiple hundreds of meetings thus far since SGMA's been passed. And we continue to do that in order to have everything be done, outreach be done in a public setting in order to do our business in public. So what we've done, I talked a little bit about that already. I'll just glance over it. We developed governance. We developed our 2 GSAs. Those GSAs are both joint powers authorities that can act. And both GSAs have a memorandum of agreement, between them. And we have technical advisory committees that meet. And we're starting again to continuing to do robust stakeholder outreach, of which this webinar is one such item. Okay, the next slide, please. This is just a timeline of the review process. We're not necessarily looking at each individual piece. It's just to show that there is a staggered approach for the Groundwater Sustainability Plan and its release of draft chapters. The chapters 1, 2, and 4 in that top line you see there have already been released. And just last week, Chapter 5, the water budget chapter, has been released for public comments. And so you see the process leading all the way to a January 2022 or sooner adoption of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan for the Sub Basin. And so we have this, just to give a quick idea on where we've been and where we're going. Of course, a lot started before this timeline here even existed, because there was a lot of pre-work that was done after SGMA, but before GSP development began. So next slide. This is what I talked about on the previous slide here. These are the 4 chapters that are out for public review. They're all available at turlockgroundwater.org/GSP. And you could even just Google search Turlock Groundwater on all of the previous research Turlock Groundwater on Turlock Sub Basin or Turlock Groundwater, and you'll find our website. And we have a big button at the top that says GSP. So we have Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 4, and Chapter 5. They are all available for comment right now. They cover administrative information, the plan area for the GSP, the basin setting, and also water budget. So you see we're starting to get away from the narrative information on where we're at and who we are in Chapter 1 and 2 to more of a analytical approach using tools and other items for our water budget. So those are all available. Just to plug, and you'll hear it more than once today, go to turlockgroundwater.org/GSP, and you'll be able to download those and also to find ways to comment, which would be my next slide. So 3 ways to comment on the GSP thus far. We have of course, we still take, what they call snail mail, the United States Postal Service mail, and there's a address there. And then we also have email. We're taking them at the email address that was mentioned by Lisa earlier today, the Turlock Groundwater at gmail.com address. And so we are accepting comments thus far, and we've already received some comments at that address. And then for people who don't want to email or just have access to the World Wide Web only, we have a web form available on our site as well for each of those, for each of these chapters. And so accepting comments on those, and continue to want to see what stakeholders feel about what we have put forward in the draft chapters of the GSP. And then the next slide. And now, I believe I'm going to segue to Michael Cook, who will be presenting on the draft chapters 1, 2, and 4 that have been released for public comment. And he may even talk a little bit about chapter 5 as well. So Michael, on to you.
Well, let's wait 1 second. Let's just see if there's any questions. And if you're online with us today, would you take a moment and just put a few notes for me in your box, in your chat question box, and just let us know what brought you today to the meeting. If there's something in particular you're interested in hearing about, or that any questions about anything that you've heard so far, I'm also happy if you want to raise your hand to do that. But I'd like to wait just a minute and have you, if you would please take a minute and let us know what brought you here today. And I'm incredibly patient, and I've actually sent like 5 minutes aside to do this in the agenda. So I'll go ahead and wait for you to do that. Okay, Michael, you are unmuted. You're self-muted, but go ahead and tell us what brought you here today. So go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Yeah, this is Mike Day with Provost Pritchard. I'm a resident of Houston, and I just have fallen a little behind on meetings, and I'm hoping to catch up some on just exactly where we're at.
Great. Is there something in particular you were interested in hearing more about today?
I know we're going to be talking some about the water budgets.
Okay, super. And then I have a note here from Amanda, and Amanda's here from the Leadership Council, and she's here. She's been working with the Delhi residents, and she wants to ensure that their drinking water resources are going to be protected by the GSP. Is that something you're going to cover at all today, Michael?
Not specifically, but it leads in nicely to that. So we'll kind of explain how the preliminary chapters lead to understanding better how we can protect those important drinking water resources for people in Delhi and other areas.
Super, thank you. Anybody else? And I am hoping I say this correctly. So this is Arcella Selly, and she is also from the Leadership Council, and she just wants to actually know a little bit more about what's in the GSP chapters. And please, if I didn't say that correctly, go ahead and just write for me phonetically how to say it correctly. And anybody else that would like to comment? How about you, Ryan? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm in the element industry, so I'm just kind of watching this as it forms. And yeah, I'll be curious about the water budgets and if pumping will be able to continue in this basin as usual, or we'll have to do some curtailing of that.
Have you been doing? Have you been monitoring a lot of the meetings? If you're from the industry, or is this something in particular focused on just the sub basin?
I was in the beginning. I'd come to the TAC meetings. I kind of lost track over the last probably 2 years of what's been going on, but I've attended, I think the last 2 TAC meetings to kind of got, refreshed on progress that's been made in the years that I missed.
Yeah, this is a great way to join us, and thank you for being here today. And Savannah, if there was anything that you wanted to say, I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to here's a note to me. And she's from LRE Water, and she just wants to know more about what's going on with the basins and about the basins, and her mic's not working. So, all right, well, I'm sorry to take the little sidetrack there, but Michael, I know you're interested in what people want to hear about, so I'm going to turn this back to you.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. So I'm going to get to core of the presentation right away. We're going to cover today is which draft chapters are available right now. Why are we releasing draft chapters separately? So some of the questions people had will be covered in future chapter releases, but we'll be having more of these for that type of participation. What's in the GSP so far, and how does the public review process work? So the chapters we've released so far is actually 1, 2, and 4. And as of Monday night, actually, Chapter 5, the water budgets, was released, but we're going to have a separate presentation on that to delve a little bit deeper. And so GSA organization structure, jurisdictional boundaries, and hydrologic conceptual model and groundwater conditions. These are the first things we've done. They set the foundation for our future management actions that will help us manage the basin sustainably, and as was asked earlier, protect important drinking water supplies. So perhaps you're wondering, why are we releasing draft chapters in chunks like this? We thought it was a good approach to be less overwhelming, so we could delve in deeply each time a chapter is released with the public and with our boards and with other interested parties, so they could really understand what's in the plan rather than receive the final draft version. It's an overwhelming document. And again, a way to get input early on for us. So if we're off course slightly, we want to know now, so it's easier to get back on course, rather than wait till the end, get comments and realize we've missed the mark too much. So again, thank you for your early participation in the public process. Again, each chapter builds on each other. And the chapters we'll talk about today are kind of the foundational chapters to set the stage for management activities in the basin. So Herb kind of covered this a little bit just so we understand. This is the Turlock Sub Basin. We have the Merced to the south, Modesto to the north. Our boundaries are the Tuolumne River and the Merced River and the San Joaquin River to the west, and then kind of the foothills in the east, kind of up in the Snelling area there, if you know where I'm talking about. We're surrounded by critically overdrafted basins, so the Merced, the Delta Mendota, the East San Joaquin, the Modesto and Turlock are not critically overdrafted. You'll understand why a little bit more about that as we get into these chapters as well as chapter 5. And then this, as Herb mentioned, our sustainability plan is due to DWR at the end of January of next year. So we've got some work to do ahead of us. So as Herb mentioned, we have 2 GSAs, the West Turlock and the East Turlock. The basin's about 545 square miles. West Turlock's about 60% of that, East Turlock's 40% of that, and I mentioned already the boundaries were in. So just so people have some geographic concepts there, this is the 2 GSAs who are preparing a single sustainability plan. And so who are the main users of groundwater in our basin? That's something we had to define. So irrigated agriculture is the largest beneficial user, and it uses about 70% the water in the sub-basin. The remainder is primarily urban uses. So remember that 70-30 mix. We have to look at surface water supply in that infrastructure. So in the West Turlock GSA, the Tuolumne River provides about 80% of the agricultural water supply. And TID has about 240 miles of canals that come out of, LaGrange Diversion Dam into Turlock Lake and the distribution from there. And there is, if you can kind of see in the kind of on the right-hand side there, in the East Turlock GSA, there actually is a source of surface water supply from Merced Irrigation District to the North Side Canal. And one of the things we had to look at is, where are the sources of public drinking water supply in the sub-basin as a whole? And as you can see, they're mainly clustered on the western portion in the West Turlock Sub Basin GSA. And so you have some of the larger cities like Turlock, Ceres, and South Modesto, but also some of the smaller communities that provide drinking water like Delhi, Hilmar, Denair, Keys, Hickman, and Houston. So again, understanding where those domestic sources of supply are and how they interrelate to everything else within the subbasin. We also had to look at rural supply. So not everybody's attached to a public drinking water system. Many people have their own wells that provide their drinking water supply. Again, primarily clustered in the west, where we have smaller parcels of land. Almost 1,000 domestic wells in our region. In 2015, we know that about 165 shallow wells failed. They went dry. And so again, that was informative as we start putting sustainable management criteria and minimum thresholds together to determine what groundwater levels are appropriate to protect domestic drinking water supply. And again, interestingly enough, almost 400 new wells have been drilled in the last 6 years, which are probably a couple of reasons. One, some of those wells are older, but secondly, trying to mitigate the impact of declining water levels in the region. One of the other things we'll look at is the geological framework for our subbasin. And so basically what this shows is the older rocks start off in the eastern portion and dip underneath towards the San Joaquin River, and there's newer formations, sedimentary more rocks in the western portion of the subbasin. And again, these will help as we delve deeper, finding out where the sources of supply are.
So Michael, what does that mean then when you say that there's the younger sediments in the west and older sediments? Is that something you're going to talk about in another slide, or? Yeah,
generally, but it shows that the geology dips, so it doesn't go directly horizontal, it dips downwards. It's kind of at that 45 or 30-degree angle that's shown there. And then the younger sediments have different types of availability to water supply, as do the older sediments, older rocks to the east. So it's kind of just, it'll help explain where the water is and how it's accessed and how deep it is and that type of thing.
Okay, thanks.
Where the water-bearing strata are. The other thing we have to look at is recharge potential. Obviously, one of the opportunities to get more water into the aquifer is to find sources of supply and then recharge that. So it's like putting money back into the water account or into the bank account. And what we see here, building on that last slide, is that the younger sediments in the west are more apt for recharge projects, and the older rock formations in the east are less suitable for recharge projects. So something to bear in mind as we look at projects to recharge the aquifer, where are they best located? And those kind of red and green areas show the best locations for recharge. So in the eastern area, it's primarily along the rivers, which are more user-friendly for recharge projects. Again, going back to the geology again, this shows that the kind of the yellow areas, the yellow globs show where water is more readily available in the kind of larger grained sediments. And so you see there on the eastern side, so the right-hand side of that diagram, a lot of the wells are much deeper to get down to the better water supply. And then the western portion there, the wells tend to be a little bit shallower. So these little lines represent wells and depth of water and that type of thing. Also help us define the Corcoran clay layer, which will be important as we talk about subsidence later on in the presentation. As you know, parts of the valley, Los Banos and further south have been suffering from subsidence as clay layers have been dewatered, and that's one of the undesirable results we have to avoid in our subbasin. So understanding where that Corcoran clay layer is, that light blue layer, was very important as we work towards sustainable management criteria for that undesirable result. So the other things we looked at is just the overall framework. We look here, there's a lot going on, I recognize that, but as you can see, those three colors are discontinuous because we actually have faulting from earthquakes. And so it's kind of like a layer cake, and then somebody's kind of messed it up by lifting up one side and pushing down another side. So those layers aren't continuous. We had to calculate where the base of fresh water is. So basically it says if you go down deep, how deep do you have to go until the water starts to get to a point where it's no longer fresh, where it's more saline? And so we see there about 900 to 1,000 feet. Once you get deeper than that, particularly in the western portion and the central portion, the water actually becomes more saline. So the idea of, well, if you just drill deeper wells, you can keep getting a continuous supply is not necessarily true, because the water quality changes as you go deeper. And then that kind of blue line with the little triangles on top of it, that is the 2015 elevation of groundwater in our region. So as you can see, as you move from west to east, the depth of the groundwater gets deeper below ground. And that's another important thing to understand. The kind of the dashed line in the middle of the diagram shows kind of the boundary between the West Turlock and the East Turlock GSA. So again, West Turlock, shallower wells, East Turlock, deeper wells. West Turlock using kind of the green, a little bit of the orangey area for water supply. The east side using that orange aquifer area or a strata to pull water from. All right, so when we look at water level trends in the sub-basin since over the last 25 years, we'll start with the West Turlock area. So we took some monitoring, some wells there, and they're labeled just for ease of reference 5 through 9. And then the hydrograph for each one of those wells is shown on the graph there. As you can see, there's some general decline in the West Turlock area, a little bit of up and down as we go through drought seasons and rainy seasons, or rainy years and wet and dry years. Overall, there's a slight downward trend, but generally fairly stable groundwater levels in the West Turlock Sub Basin GSA. And again, remember at the beginning I mentioned that most of the West Turlock gets his agricultural water supply from surface water, from Tuolumne River water, not from the ground. So groundwater is used as a supplemental supply during the dry year. So somewhat stable groundwater levels on the west side. On the east side, it's a little bit of a different story. So you see those wells 15 through 18 there, and kind of west and south of Turlock Lake. You can see over the years a drop in the depth of groundwater there, about 40 to 50 feet, depending where the well is and the time of year, and a general much marked decline in groundwater levels. So that's something we had to understand what was going on in our aquifer. A little bit of a difference from west to east, and more of a overdraft problem here on the east side than on the west side. And this next slide explains that in a little bit more detail. For people who are not used to groundwater contours, I apologize, but basically each line represents the depth to groundwater, and that kind of circular pattern, like a donut developing there, shows that there's a circle or a cone of having to go deeper and deeper to get to where the water is below ground surface. So we call that a cone of depression, and that cone is deepening and widening over time, and that historical overdraft is getting worse in the east and central portion of the sub-basin. So again, when we talk about sustainability, this is not considered sustainable over a long time, and this is an issue we have to address. But again, part of our challenges is the eastern sub-basin has a lack of data. So this is kind of our best analysis of what we think the groundwater levels look like, or the trends look like. But as we work through the plan, particularly in the first 5 years, and drill more monitoring wells, we'll get a much better understanding of what really is going on and what projects and programs we have to put in place to address that overdraft.
Michael, before you leave this slide, could you go back and just, could you show us in reference to this where Delhi is?
Delhi is like down here somewhere. Oh, this show up. You see my cursor or no?
Yeah, I can, yeah. So it's
well, here's
actually
right
over in there, so it's not in the middle of that kind of depression.
No. But the concerns you see, again, preliminary data, but the cone seems to be expanding, so it could start to expand and start affecting the Delhi area. So these are things we do have to keep an eye on and work through.
Thank you.
No problem. Good question. The next thing, one of the other factors we have to look at is land subsidence. I mentioned it earlier as we were talking about the Cork and Clay area. This map is kind of a more regional map or northern San Joaquin Valley map, and it shows the areas of subsidence there directly south of Merced, Los Banos, and then further south again in other basins south of Fresno. So no subsidence in the Turlock area yet, but subsidence here in Los Banos and further south, a little more, that type of thing. So the way subsidence occurs is if overpumping kind of dries out or depressurizes the Cork and Clay, those clay layers collapse because there's no water, keeping the particles apart, and then that clay layer that collapsed won't re-expand once it gets wet again, and so the ground actually starts to drop, and that can be quite significant, having adverse impact on streets and bridges and utility facilities too. So that's something we have to watch for. And this slide explains kind of what our approach is going to be. We've looked at what's called INSAR data, which is basically satellite imaging that shows some trends here. There's a slight trend in downward ground levels in this part of the world, 1 inch to 2 inches. We're not sure what was causing that. Was that subsidence, or was that just people grading fields or construction or whatever else? So we have to ground truth that as we work through our plan. So this area here, a little bit of reduction in ground levels there. So we're going to follow that over time.
So that's literal. That's literal ground truth.
Right. Exactly. Now, like in the Merced area, the subsidence was 4 or 5 times that amount, and that was actual subsidence. So again, this is the kind of things that crops up. It's like, well, we're not seeing a reduction in groundwater. We don't think we're seeing depressurization of the Cork and Clay, but we do see a change in groundwater levels. What's causing that? I'm sorry, ground levels or land levels. So we need to check into that. And over time, we'll look at INSAR data, look at groundwater data, and kind of marry the two together to figure out what's going on in the sub-basin, because subsidence is not a good impact to have. It's basically it. Herb kind of covered this stuff. We're releasing chapters 1, 2, and 4. The final water budget actually got released, supposed to be middle of August. It's actually the 1st of September, so we came pretty close to beating our target. Oh, this one here, beating our target. We're a little bit delayed here, and the next chapters to release are these ones. They are kind of going through internal review right now. We're getting closer, and hopefully we can catch up on our schedule, have everything out by end of October, 2 months of review, and then adoption here at the end of January. So that's our goal.
So when you're talking about our water budget, then that's the water that's kind of coming in and the water that's going out, and you're just trying to make a match. Is that what that means?
That's in a nutshell. Our water budget is no different to a household budget. It's water in, water out. Where's that water coming from? What are the sources of supply? We've got rainfall, we've got water coming down from underground below the mountains, water coming from the rivers, water coming from irrigation, and we've got pumping and other uses. So what that does is look at all the types of ins and outs, I guess you could say, in the sub-basin, and where the water is flowing back and forth and what those impacts are. And that's actually, again, the two boards had a joint meeting on Monday night and looked at the draft chapters. It looks good. Release that to the public for review. And I think one of our goals is to have another one of these meetings like this, just to go through that chapter by itself, because there's a lot of information there. And that's kind of when the rubber meets the road type of chapters that people are very interested in. So that's coming up soon.
Great.
And then just finish up here again, as Herb mentioned at the beginning, 3 ways to submit comments: mail, email, or the website. It says comments on this chapter, except until September 1st. We'll obviously take comments whenever you're ready, but sooner is always better. And again, more chapters are being released, one last Monday and a couple to follow pretty quickly after that. And as we get towards the end of the line here on developing a sustainability plan for the Turlock Sub Basin. So with that, I know I've had a couple of questions already, which I really appreciate, but do we have other things people want to know about?
Okay. Well, we will, Michael Day, please go ahead. Your mic was open, so I saw you, it says you're self-muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I really don't have any questions. Thanks for the update.
Yeah. So in terms of going forward, he's going to be talking about the water budget and those types of things. Is there anything that you're in particular looking forward to hearing about?
Projects for sure.
Uh-huh.
And what are they going to cost? And how are we going to come up with that money?
Yeah. Yeah. That's always a question that's on people's mind. How about you, Ryan? Was there something in particular that you were interested in, or thoughts, comments, things you'd like to hear more about?
I think as we get into the water budgets, it's more about what I want to hear. And also, yeah, projects. I know there's a lot of grant money out there for projects. So just if there's anything that's in the pipeline or being talked about.
Okay, thank you. So our folks from the Leadership Council, I don't know if you want to just put something in the chat, or I'm curious to know if there's anything else that you'd like to focus on or talk more about, or for future meetings, something that you're hoping that he covers. And you're both self-muted. If you'd like to talk, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can put something in the chat. And I know, Savannah, your mic's not working, so please feel free to do the same.
At
Okay.
least I might add that, as we get the sustainable management criteria chapter, which I think is done, my coworker Shea can correct me, you'll see that what we did, we chose to try and maintain water levels at or above 2015 levels. 2015 was the previous drought we went through. We have a good sense of how water levels at that depth impact drinking water wells, because we had empirical evidence of how many wells went dry. And so we know if we can manage at that level, we'll be no worse than we were in 2015. And the wells that did go bad at that time have been replaced. So hopefully the goal is, by maintaining at 2015 levels, water levels or above, we won't see impacts to domestic wells. Again, that's the best information we have right now. We'll continue to monitor it, but the goal is to rather kind of avoidance of problems rather than try to mitigate problems. And that's what we're trying to be protective there of those drinking water supplies.
Amanda, go ahead. And you're self-muted, so go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Oh, shoot. I thought, yeah, I pressed the lower hand instead of the mute button. I was saying, thanks y'all for the presentations. Yeah, I think we're probably most concerned with paying the most attention to the sustainable management criteria development, and then probably after that, the projects and management actions. And thank you, Michael, for explaining the 2015 levels. I know that's something that's come up in past meetings, in the TAC meetings. I don't know if y'all had a chance to look at the State Water Board's letter on the Merced Sub Basin GSP, but they did say that even when that is taken as the sustainable management criteria for groundwater levels, there still needs to be a more comprehensive analysis of what data gaps might the GSA might have, what wells it might not be looking at, and where there still could be wells going dry, and factoring in, how to mitigate for that or avoid those impacts. Is that something that y'all have thought about?
Well, yeah, the Merced letter was very helpful to us, because obviously being our neighbor and also getting an insight into what DWR is looking at. So again, we've got that. We've seen a copy of that letter, and it's being passed around and looked at. And yeah.
Okay, great. We'll be interested in engaging more in that conversation later. Is that going to be which chapter is that?
I think that'll be
sustainable.
the sustainable management criteria, which someone's got to help me. I don't know the actual chapter number.
So he's asking, he got what do they call it when you call for a friend? Is that what they call it?
Call an
I'm
audible.
phoning a friend right now.
It's a
Debbie.
lifeline. Debbie.
I've never been the friend that was called. It's going to be sustainable management criteria as chapter 6.
Okay.
And we hope to release that along with the monitoring networks around the same time, so you can kind of see both. And we're in the process of developing the interim milestones, which will kind of tell us more with respect to the issue that you're talking about, and then we'll be working through all of that. So we don't have all of the answers yet, but we are definitely going to look at it and we'll have an opportunity to be engaged as we work through that.
Debbie, a rough time because chapter 5 came out on Monday, and so the monitoring networks, the sustainable management criteria, and product management and actions. Obviously, people have asked a couple of times about that. When those chapters will be out to the public.
I don't have an exact date yet. We are hoping to have a discussion about all of that on the 23rd at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting. So it's hoped that Draft Groundwater will have the time between now and then to work through all of that. That she's working on a trial as well, and so her time has been difficult.
That's your technical consultant. Todd is your technical consultant that's helping you. Okay.
Yes, and so so she's working around the other the case that she's working on to work through that and develop the revisions. We have looked at the sustainable management criteria section 1 already, and we had some comments, and so she's in the process of kind of incorporating those comments from the technical advisory committee, and then, like I said, developing those interim milestones as draft and bring it back to the technical advisory committee for review and discussion. And so that's what's planned for the 23rd. So you might be interested in that meeting as well.
Okay, definitely. Thanks, Debbie. Yep, and Araceli and I should be at that meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. So I have got a couple of notes also. So one of them is Savannah shared the fact that there's a tool that people can use to see where their well might go dry, and it's at www.gspdrywells.com. And she says they're working on expanding the tool to include the medium priority basins. And I think I have a pretty sophisticated audience that knows what these things are. And then Mike Day had to hop off, but he did thank you all for the opportunity to participate in this. And I just want to check here. So for Ryan and Amanda and Savannah and the rest of you that are with me today, I personally think this stuff is pretty important, and the staff has, I think, done a nice job of preparing some information that's pretty digestible. How do we get people more interested in these meetings? How do we get people to participate? Are we not letting people know about it well enough, or what do we need to be doing here? So do you have any ideas, Amanda?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, my question just has to do with, we have kind of low attendance today, and I think this stuff is pretty important. And do you have any suggestions to us about how we get more folks to come and hear some of this really good information?
I think that's a really good question. I kind of want to pass it off to Araceli to see if she has any good ideas about that.
Great, go ahead and take it away if you do.
Hi. Well, my first suggestion would be definitely to diversify the time that you meet, because I know a lot of folks that I invited were working right now and couldn't come. I think it would be great to partner with organizations and maybe come to a community meeting and present there, just because I know some folks sometimes feel intimidated. And especially, like, I've never used whatever platform this is. I had to download this before I got on, and I think a lot of folks are really used to Zoom right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was joining, I was like, oh no, I hope that other people are able to download this, people who I invited. So
Okay.
that's something that I noted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be great to partner with folks. Like, I would love to have you all at a community meeting in Delhi with the group that I meet with. I think that would be a great way to get people involved.
Okay. Herb, is that something that's feasible?
Yes, I'm sorry, I had a second to unmute. It's not only feasible, but actually, we've been talking with Leadership Council to get something like that going on specific to the community of Delhi. And so it's early, but it's in the works. And so that type of meeting is perfect for other things as well. And so that's definitely a good suggestion.
Great. Thank you. And then also, we had a note from Savannah. She said we could let Don Wright know about it because he has the blog that, of course, everybody reads Don Wright's blog. And let's, Ryan, suggestions. Ryan, have you got any suggestions for me?
No, they're new. No, I mean, as for me, this is all very preliminary for how it's going to affect my industry, but I still, want to follow up to see how it progresses. I think as it goes on and people see how it's going to impact them directly, I think it will get more interest. But as it's now, it's really in the preliminary stages, and it's a lot of question marks. It gets talked about amongst my community, but it's like, well, where's it at? Like, well, still planning. So there's no answers really yet.
So you think once people kind of have a feeling for what's going to be in there, then there's going to be more interest. So just need a little bit more meat on the bone.
Yeah, I think Zoom was a great idea too. I don't know what this is, but my audio has been cutting in and out like the last 10 minutes. So
we can absolutely do this on Zoom. There's no problem with that. So that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't understand it. The video is just fine, but the audio, it keeps having to reconnect.
Yeah, well, that's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow along when you can't hear.
Well, we need to fix that. So that's good feedback. Thank you both to all of you for that. Well, I personally don't have any reason to keep people in meetings longer than they need to be in them. Let me just check in with Herb and see if there's any kind of last thoughts, or with the team, if there's any last thoughts that people would like to share. I really appreciate the participation of the audience today.
I think I'll just jump in. There's no final thoughts from me. We have some final slides here that are basically things that we've mentioned a little bit before. We want you to do, one of three things, hopefully, apart from just getting general information about what's going on in the Turlock Sub Basin. The first would be, continue to find ways to connect with us. Most of our meetings are put up on, and webinars are on our Turlock Groundwater YouTube channel. You can access any of our social channels on our website at turlockgroundwater.org. We have the email that's listed there that was referenced by Lisa. We obviously look at that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then, the 4 chapters that are out currently, we're looking for people to comment on them. And so I will say I'm personally happy to hear about some of these suggestions that have been mentioned on this call for kind of expanding our depth and breadth of outreach. And we'll take those anytime. And so I like what I've heard. It'll certainly help us moving forward on the outreach front. But again, just stay connected, read and comment on our GSP, and visit our website at turlockgroundwater.org to get information. And I think the number one thing too is I think most people on this call are signed up for our email list serve, but you could sign up on our website for our listserv there, and that's the fastest way, other than social media, that we reach out and connect with people. So certainly happy to continue the conversation, and I will stop there for now and see if anyone else has any parting thoughts. Oh yes, one more thing. we've tentatively, well, now that we're saying it, we'll say it's more than tentatively now that we have a Chapter 5 out. Looking forward to talking about water budgets on September 16th, which is just a couple weeks away, at our next virtual groundwater lunch hour. And so stay tuned for that. You'll start seeing information on that pop up in your inboxes or on our site as well. All right, now I will stop and see if any other panelists have parting thoughts.
I think for me, Herb, I'm good. This is Michael. Thank you for that.
Great. Well, I think it's a wrap then. So thank you all. Let's see, we've got just one more note here, and thanks all. So we'll let everybody go. Have a great rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you on the 16th.